Hey everyone, welcome to Wildlife Inspired. I'm your host, Scott Keys. This is your channel for photography, for wildlife, and for wildlife photography. I'm going head to head today, guys. I know you love these videos. We're going to do DxO Labs PureRAW 5 versus Topaz Photo. This will be the most comprehensive video you have seen on this subject, I promise you, and we'll get to it right after this. Today's video, we're going to put two powerhouse pieces of software up against each other. It's going to be DxO PureLab 5 versus Topaz Photo. Primarily, we're going to look at noise reduction, but this is actually going to be a pretty comprehensive review. We're going to talk about things like the workflow and how they differ, how the price structures differ, the results, are they similar or different? Probably what most people care about, honestly, is the results. You're going to be surprised in this video because that's not where I'm going to spend all of my time. There's more difference than just how good they are. And spoiler alert, they're both really, really good at what they do. So a choice, if somebody's looking at this video to try to decide which product is better, by the end of this video, you're gonna have a pretty good idea of which one's right for you. But it's not fair to say one is better than the other. They are just very different in certain ways. At the end of this, we'll talk about that and who each of these pieces of software is going to be for. And then at the end, I'm going to do one of those fun comparison charts that I like to do. Hey, if you know me as the practical wildlife photographer, you know I do a ton of comparisons. And in this video, we're going to have a lot of comparisons. So I want to get started by talking about sort of the history of these. First of all, there's several pieces of third-party software available. If you are a Lightroom and or Photoshop user, you have some pretty good built-in noise reduction. You can do your noise reduction. You can do some sharpening right there. You do not need a third-party piece of software. However, both of the pieces I'm going to show you today are better than the results you'll get out of Photoshop. Now, I know some people are going to argue with me and they're going to say, no, Camera Raw or Lightroom is just as good. I can tell you it's not. These pieces that I'm going to show you today, even if you're a Lightroom and Photoshop user, may be of interest. So, my history, I want to just give you a real quick background on this. We're going to talk a little bit more about Topaz. By the way, I'll put some chapters down there. So if you're not interested in my history, I think you'll find this interesting. But if you're not interested in that, skip to the comparison part. I've been using DxO Lab for about a month. They reached out to me a long time ago, and I said, honestly, I'm really happy with Topaz. I've used Topaz for 5-6 years. Really happy, don't have an interest. A lot of people challenged me and said, you need to try it. Like, you really should try it. I'm very happy with it. Finally, I contacted him and said, all right, let's do it. Send me the software. Let me look at it. If I'm happy, I'll put it in a video. Pros and cons, just like all my other videos. It's going to be compared to Topaz. I'm not going to pick and choose one. This is not paid for by either company. I am an affiliate of both. An affiliate just means that if I put a video out and you shop through links that I put down there, there is a small commission involved. I'm extremely transparent with everything I do. You don't pay anything extra. But if I can endorse a product, I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to tell you it's a good product. And then I'll provide a link down there. The company says, thank you for promoting it. And we get a little bit of a kickback as affiliates. It is very, very little. What I want to point out is a history of my history with Topaz specifically. Because I'm new with DxO and I'm very happy with the product, I want to talk about and be very transparent with my history and just talk about Topaz as in general. They were for a long time, I think without question, the best noise reduction software available. I touted it and I have always endorsed it. I still do to this day. So this is not an anti-Topaz video by any stretch of the imaginations, but they have changed. Years ago, there was a huge marketing push from Topaz. They were very affiliate centric. So they would give commissions out, they would get people to advertise, and they would provide discount codes. Now that costs a lot in terms of marketing, but it got the message out about their product. And I'm telling you, if you're like me and you've been on social media for 5 or 10 years, you used to see Topaz Labs ads all the time. And it wasn't from Topaz all the time. It was from people like me, people that used the product and just said, hey, this is great, buy it. There's a link down below, use the link, here's a discount code. That was a formula that they used. They have undergone some changes. By the way, I have been on the phone with them. I did a Zoom call with them years ago as a user, giving them feedback, and they asked me questions and I answered questions. A really nice company to work with. So I have no problem with them, but I'm going to be really transparent about my affiliations with people. Since then, they have reduced that affiliate program. No more discounts. So it's kind of a standard pay structure. They run sales, but they don't allow affiliates to discount it. There are still links available. So if somebody were to enjoy this video and shop a link, I would still get a small commission from it, just like I would if somebody shopped at DxO. I have no affiliation with the company on one, although down the road, I may do a video comparison on that as well. So recently, the most recent history with Topaz is they've changed their pricing structure. So we're going to start with comparing price. For a long time, Topaz was a standalone product that you could buy either as a suite with a one-time purchase with the option to upgrade. You would typically hear of, in the old days, we used to have products called Denoise and Sharpen. They then combine those into a product called Photo AI. It is now just called Topaz Photo. So if I make a mistake and call it Photo AI, that's the old terminology, but now it's just called Topaz Photo. It includes a lot. I'll show you in just a second. That now is a subscription. I'm putting rough estimates on prices because they do run some sales sometimes, but I'm going to put $199 a year to just own the product I'm going to show you today. It's a subscription. The one good thing about subscriptions is it's built-in updates, right? So you don't pay for updates. The nice thing about a standalone pricing is if you like the product and you never want to upgrade, you never want to update it, you don't have to pay for a different license. Once you own it for life. That's the model of DxO Labs. So the first primary difference is just the pay structure. $199 a year for Topaz, and I'm going to put this down there, $119.99 retail for DxO PureRAW 5. That's the product we're going to talk about. Both companies offer suites of other products, but these are the products that are very centric for photographers. They're very oriented around noise reduction with a little bit of sharpening. I do have a discount available for DxO. It's going to be 15% off. I'll put description down there in the description of the video. I'll put a link and I'll put that discount code down there. I have no discount codes today for Topaz, but if that changes, check the description. So if you like Topaz as a product based off of what I'm going to show you, check the description. So primary difference is just that difference in pricing. I want to talk next about workflow. Here's where it starts to get a little different. Most people are going to go right into showing you the results. This is Topaz, this is DxO, here's the differences, which one's better. It's a lot more than that. So I'm going to switch screens for this, and we're going to start with Topaz. In the bottom, there'll be some graphics. I'll try to make sure that I'm putting the graphic for the product that's up. So it'll either be the logo for DxO Labs or the logo for Topaz Photo. So this is Topaz Photo. I'm going to go into 100%, so you can see there's some options up here. But this is a raw file importer. So this is directly working with the software. I just take an image, a raw image, and I drag it onto the software, or I open the software first. It's going to pull up a screen that looks like this. It's going to go through a quick process called raw denoise. I'm going to come back and give you some stats on this. So we're going to talk about performance and computer toll, like how much work the computer has to do this. I'm going to show you that physically because that's another difference. But I just want to show you the format, the layout. It's going to pull this up. I have an option to increase this, so I'll go to 100%. And we'll look at this beautiful little pintail. Not the greatest shot. I just grabbed a random shot. Don't judge me by photography, friends. Don't say, what happened to Scott? He used to be a really good photographer. This is the format. All right. So I've got it in a raw setting. You could see up here. And now I've got some filters. I want to show you this because this is a primary difference in the ability of what these two programs do. I use these integrated into Photoshop. So in my head, I'm going to start here, but I'm eventually getting into Photoshop. They've added a lot of tools in this latest version of Topaz Photo. Dust and scratch removal. They've got focusing features, remove tools. So if there was an object or a distraction, spot healing, there's a lot of stuff in here now. The primary use of this is going to be noise reduction. And this automatically performs noise reduction when you bring the photo in. So you can see right here, it says noise reduction. This is the standard format. This is what it looks like. You would then export. And it's very important to understand. I'm importing a raw file. I have multiple options to export. I can continue to export as a raw file. If you don't know the difference between a raw file and a non-raw file, sometimes they're called like rasterized images, but if you don't understand the differences in these, it's important to understand a raw file has the most data available. It's the most editable type of format. It's also larger and it requires a different process. So not every type of program can process a raw file. Raw files truly are like data. It's just a set of numbers. When you rasterize an image, it would become another file format, often with some compression. Some have more than others. So I can export as a TIFF, a PNG, or a JPEG from here. Photo AI and DxO Labs give me the same similar options. So let me pop up what DxO Labs looks like. So I'm going to minimize this. I'm not closing it. I'm just going to minimize it. You can see when I pull open DxO Labs, I've got the image that I opened here, and I'm going to hit this little button that says process with preview. I want you to notice time real quick. Okay. It took about 5 seconds to do that. I'm going to run a time comparison in a minute. I'm going to show you the lag of time on these two and how much it takes to actually to get them running. All right, this is at 15%. I'm going to take that one to 100% also. And it's just going to take a second. You can see it updating in there. And then there's my little pintail. They look a little different, right? Like you could see there's some differences in here. They have 3 models for altering. So they have this Deep Prime 3. They're all different versions. I've played around a lot with these. They all do look a little different. I'll show you that. But I kind of settled on Deep Prime 3. It's the most recent, and this is the one I've been using. There's some sliders here. These are the only sliders available. Remember I showed you in Photo AI, or I did it, Topaz Photo, a lot of different options. They're calling this luminance, force detail, and intensity. Intensity, by the way, will only come up when you have lens sharpness optimization selected. This is a sharpening. And I'll get into the results of this in a minute, but I'm just showing you the format. So I make my 3 slider adjustment, not as many as the old one, and then I export it, and I export it again as a raw file DNG or TIFF, JPEG, or PNG. Whatever I want to export it, I export it. Then, if I want to edit in another program like Photoshop or Lightroom, I open it up again. There is one inherent difference between DxO and Photoshop. Both of them give me the ability to process the raw file. That's what I'm showing you now. This is raw file processing. Topaz has an additional function, and I'll show it to you in Photoshop in a minute, where if I'm working in Photoshop, I can start there and I can open it as a filter. I can open Topaz Photo, inside of Photoshop. I can't do that with DxO RAW. DxO RAW simply allows me to bring in a raw file, edit it, and then take it to Photoshop. Now I can take it directly there. So I can tell it just go right to Photoshop and it'll open it in Photoshop for me, or I can export it first and then bring it back in. So there is a fundamental difference in workflow there. Let's talk about process time. I will come back when I open up Photoshop. I'm going to show you that difference in workflow. Okay, so just for now, I'm just looking at the raw files. There was a couple interesting things that happened, and I'll put this down below. And I'll put the company that I'm talking about. One thing that I looked at was time of processing. So I'm going to pull this up here. I just have some notes over here because I want to give you kind of the idea of what this looked like. When I opened these files, starting with photo, it took about 6 seconds to just open the program. It took another, and these are rounded numbers because different files all process differently. About 30 seconds for it to analyze and then process the first round of noise reduction. And it does that automatically. So just to get started took me about 39 seconds, 40 seconds. If I select a filter and I change any of these functions, it's going to add time to what happens. So if I add a sharpen filter, notice over here, it's going to start running and you can actually see it happening. It's sharpening the image. Now I am going to tell you a couple things might happen here. I'm recording a video. I've got Photoshop and 2 external softwares open. My audio might glitch and you might see some frames drop. That's all from the performance. That took about another 10 seconds. Here's a big fundamental difference. This is a major difference. Every time I make a change in here, I want you to watch the update happen again. So this is a sharpen. Let's say I wanted more sharpening. Take it to 50%, hit enter. I want you to watch that preview is now, it's processing again. It's another 5 to 10 seconds. Every time I change noise reduction or sharpening, it's 5 to 10, sometimes even 15 seconds to process. So if I change noise reduction and sharpening at the same time, a lot of processing time. There's another part of this, which is how much energy or how much computer consumption is there in this process. So another interesting thing happened. I'll try to put it down below in a screenshot. When I opened Topaz as an external raw editor, it would consume as much as 9 megabytes of RAM. That's a lot of storage. Conversely, when I did DxO, it was around 1. So Topaz is way more computer intensive. I'm going to put a comparison up here in just a second, but I do want to make that point. It takes a lot more with Topaz. It would use as much as 65% of the CPU usage would be dedicated to photo at any given point. Now, it would go up and down. I could hear the fan spinning on my computer almost every time I opened Topaz Photo. With DxO Labs, it was different. Okay, so I'll put kind of, we'll call this the processing down below, so you can kind of get an idea of, and these are limits. This is kind of where the maximum was for each of these. Now let's compare, and I'll keep those processing up as we go over to DxO. So this is DxO. The processing difference is significant. So it used much less memory, and it used much less computer actual processing. In fact, I rarely had my fan turn on when I was using DxO. That is just what it is, not a judgment. If you have an amazing computer, you may not feel this. If you are already struggling with your computer in terms of performance, you might want to look at that. I'm going to put a chart up real quick, and I'll take the whole screen to do this. This is manufacturer's suggestions. And looking at this, it doesn't look much different. You can see that Topaz is kind of asking you for a little bit more. It's saying like, hey, we could use a little bit more in terms of requirements and what we suggest, but it doesn't look drastically different. From a performance standpoint, from a real performance standpoint, I can tell you it is pretty significantly different. All right. So that's about just the computer impact, the performance required, but what I actually felt. I do want to go back over here and highlight one other thing. And this is a workflow difference. So again, we're dealing with a raw file. We open it up into DxO PureRAW 5, and I've got these sliders. To open it up, again, about the same amount of time, like 6, 7, 8 seconds, not a ton of time. Once I got into an adjustment, it would take another like maybe 10 seconds. Not a ton of time, but maybe about 10 seconds. But after that, everything was almost automatic. So I want you to zoom in here. I'm going to go in a little tighter so you can see this. Okay, so we'll go into 400%. Please don't judge the quality of my pintail. He was pretty far out. Luminance is here. 0 luminance. So this is that noise reduction. You can see it happening, but what I want you to notice is the updating time. It's almost instant. Same thing with this force detail slider. You could see it update 1, 2, 3 seconds. So the force details, a little bit of updating time. The luminance, none. Down here in intensity, you'll see a difference when I go from the softest setting to the strongest setting. It feels like a sharpening slider. It is not called sharpening, but that's what it feels like. It's called intensity, and it's almost instant. So no matter where I am on here, you could see how fast it changes. Now, that's a pretty significant difference in the way they operate. Topaz is constantly evaluating the entire frame, and it's reprocessing that whole scene every time. The larger the image, the longer it's going to take. The more megabytes you have, the longer it's going to take. If you crop it first and bring it in there as a raw file, it'll save you a little bit of time in processing. So they work similarly in terms of the workflow. You're going to open the file in the software. You're going to process it. Here's where it gets a little different. Topaz is going to take you a lot longer, and it's going to use a lot more resources. DxO is going to be faster, and it's easier to adjust. Topaz in that process is going to give you a lot more options. So you've got a lot of sliders. I showed you that before. Once you make those initial adjustments, you're going to export them. And the export time on these was fairly close. I actually made a chart down here. The export time that I had on a DNG file for Topaz was about 1.5 minutes. And for a TIFF, it was a little over 1 minute. And then for DxO, it was about 40 to 45 seconds. So Topaz, again, just longer. It takes more resources. Some of this could be that my computer was being strained at the time I did this, because I did notice the more I had open, Topaz took even longer. It took like exponentially longer because it just needs a lot of resources to run. So that kind of covers this first stage, like this workflow. How do you get it in? How do you get it out? What options are available? And then what are the differences in those workflows along with computer performance? Now we're going to get into one other type of workflow, and it's going to be based around Photoshop. All right, so I pulled this image up in Photoshop. So I know a lot of people that work in Photoshop primarily, or Lightroom, but I wanted to show you this Photoshop option because it is a very powerful distinguishing component between DxO Labs and Topaz. Topaz offers you the ability to work directly as a filter, which does not happen in DxO Labs. There's a couple of things to know about this. When we talked about the first round I showed you was the raw conversion. So we were working with raw files. Once you open this folder in Photoshop, you're not working in a raw file anymore when you put it into the photo filter. So let me just open this up, show you what I mean. So this first image, I'm gonna click on, you can see these showing up. This is the newest version I have. It's called Topaz Photo. And it's gonna open up. Now we can estimate the time that it takes to do this, but I'm working in Photoshop and it's pulling Topaz as like a third party and it's integrating it right into Photoshop. So I can do this as part of my workflow. What I don't have to do is open it up, edit it, save it, open it again in Photoshop. I can kind of do it all in one process. This is the way I've edited for years. This is by far the most convenient way for me to do this process. Is it as good? Because a lot of people are going to say, well, but does it work the same way as when I do it as a raw file? The answer is slightly different. So I'll show you that when we get to the results. But I do need to show you this because it's a huge part. This is a convenience not offered by DxO Labs. You cannot open the latest versions of DxO Lab cannot be opened as a integrated filter. Now it looks very familiar. It looks exactly like the screen we just had, but I want you to notice it's part of Photoshop. You can actually see Photoshop telling us, hey, you've got the Topaz plugin opened up. And I can make my changes here. So I'm going to go into denoise and I'll select, like 40% or something like that. And I'll hit enter. And then let's just watch this processing time. Now I will tell you, it is a little faster when working in Photoshop. And the reason is, I got to believe the reason is I'm no longer working in a raw file. The Photoshop, think of it as like, if you understand what a TIFF file is, think of it as working in TIFF files. So these layers are kind of like TIFF equivalent layers. There's a lot of information here. They're just not true raw files. For that reason, they actually work a little faster. Interesting story. When I worked with Topaz years ago, this was about 5 years ago, their raw file processing was not as good. It was actually better to open it in Photoshop. And the way they explained it to me was every time we do a raw file conversion, we have to work with the manufacturer's code specific to that manufacturer's code. When we work in Photoshop, Photoshop kind of does the conversion for us. So we let Photoshop do the raw file conversion, and then we deal with what's left. And it made it much easier from an engineering standpoint to work in Photoshop. But a lot of people wanted the flexibility of working on raw files, and there is more data there. And technically, you're going to see it can be a little bit better if you work in the raw file. But this is the way I would do it. So we saw that little bit of processing time, right? Notice every time I move it, I mentioned that it has to kind of reprocess. So every time I change these settings, but now I can export back into Photoshop. So I opened it in Photoshop, I exported it back into Photoshop, and the processing time is faster than the raw file part. So again, that raw file conversion just takes a little bit longer to work in it, to save in it. The whole system working in a raw file is going to be a little bit longer. The time, by the way, to process this back into Photoshop was about 20 seconds compared to a minute or more when I was saving it as a raw file. So something to know, it is a little bit faster when we're using Topaz Labs to work in here. And then I have, and I'll zoom in here so we could see it, I would have in Photoshop, this is the original. I'll zoom in a little bit more so you could see it. And then in layers, I created a separate layer. This is the way I've worked for a long time. I love working in Topaz in layers so I can create an adjustment layer for that denoising and deal with it separately. For those of you that understand the power of Photoshop, I'll kind of pull this out and I think you'll be able to see it. Is you probably understand that working in layers is extremely powerful. So there's those two layers I was talking about. And that's that noise reduction layer where it says background copy. That's a separate layer in Photoshop with noise reduction on it. If I wanted to do that from the raw file, it would be a little bit more challenging from a workflow standpoint. I would actually have to open the original file in Photoshop, then open the raw file editing in either DxO or Topaz Photo. I would edit and export it and then import it back into Photoshop. So it's a more convoluted process. It's not wrong. There's not a right or wrong way. When I tell you For some people, this might make the decision for you. You might say like, nope, that's the way I want to work. I want to work in Photoshop. I want to work as a separate layer. I want the ability to quickly process it. It's going to process faster because I'm not working with the raw file, but I'm still working with a high quality image. That's the way I want to do it. That might make your decision for you because there are some differences, and that is a primary fundamental difference. So we talked about structure differences. We talked about process differences. The raw file conversion, not too much different for either one. But we did mention DxO. It's not as intensive on the computer. But now I know I'm going to get into what a lot of people really want to get into, which is, Scott, which one looks better? Like, what are the results? I got 3 images we're going to go through. I am going to tell you this as I pull up this first one. Let's actually go with this one. I did a crop on Instagram. So I cropped this image down, and I asked people top and bottom. I processed one in DxO, one in Topaz, didn't tell them which one. Which one looks better? When it was cropped but not super tight, 75% of people thought DxO looked better. What is interesting, I flipped them in the next story and I cropped them harder. So I cropped it all the way down to the eye. And then 75% of the people thought Topaz looked better. It was so much of this when it comes to sharpening. It's not about our eyes pick up on sharpening more than they pick up on noise. When noise is good, we don't really notice it. When noise is bad, we notice it. When sharpening's really good, we notice it. Like our eye picks up on things that seem super sharp. The odd thing is sometimes things that are sharp from a distance and then you get closer, I call it crunchy. They look really crunchy. They look almost artificial. So let's look at what happened with this one. This is the original image. This first image is going to be Topaz. You're not going to be able to tell much of a difference here. And then this is going to be DxO Labs. You noticed some change in the camera profile. What I mean by this is DxO Labs applies a camera profile that will eliminate, if you tell it to, it'll eliminate vignetting. That's built in. So you could see the middle doesn't, it looks like the whole thing got brighter. It didn't. It removed the vignetting on the outside, so it appeared to brighten up the whole image. It did not brighten the actual bird. You'll see that when I zoom in. All right, let's go in a little bit closer now. Okay, so here's the original image with noise. I think the noise value on this was ISO, I think it was 1600 to 3200. That's the range of ISO. So this is a little noisy. On my camera, the Z9, when you start getting above 1600 on the ISO, you start to introduce a decent amount of noise. But when you crop in, you really show the noise. So in this case, we're zoomed in pretty good. You see a lot of that noise. This is the first one. So this is going to be photo. So that's Topaz Photo. And then this is going to be that DxO. I will tell you this. If we just looked at this, and I'm going to go ahead and put them in a bigger screen. Okay, so I'm going to put them full screen side by side. And I'm going to take up as much of the resolution of this video as I can. All right, so I'm going to crop these. Watch this full screen. So put on your computer full screen. This is 2K. So each of these images is going to be like about a little over 1,000 pixels wide. But I'm going to crop it in tight. Which one looks better? For some of you, you're going to think DxO looks better. For some of you, I promise you, you're going to think Topaz looks better. This is very consistent with my findings. Both of them are really good. Neither one is better in terms of results. People are going to argue this. You can argue this all day long with somebody. I have another comparison with Photoshop in a minute, so just bear with me. I'm going to put on a filter. Now, a lot of people say when I do this kind of like editing stuff like, Scott, what are the filters? Don't ask me what the filter is. I run a Patreon site. Unfortunately, I have to do extra work. As a professional photographer, Patreon is a paid subscription site. There's a ton of value in there. That's where I do my editing. So if you want to learn how to edit, go over to Patreon. I'll teach you all of this stuff. But I'm going to put a filter on here that shows noise a little bit better. So there's the original. That's the Topaz noise. That's the DxO noise. Again, my goal is not for it to be gone. It's to minimize it so it's not a distraction. There's nothing to me that is great about just a completely gloss-free, noise-free image. A little bit of noise isn't going to kill anybody. So this is the Topaz again, and that's the DxO. The noise patterns are both very, very good. They're both acceptable, and if you look in close, I'm telling you, there's not that much of a difference. Where you might notice a difference is around this eye, and this is why some people thought with the Topaz image it looked better, because Topaz actually sharpens that a little bit better. In that process, it can also artifact a little bit more. So if you've ever used Topaz, you may know what I'm talking about, but if you zoom in on Topaz processed images, they can have a little bit of artifacting. All right, let's get into the next one. I got 3 examples for you today. This is a hooded merganser, and we're going to do the same type of test. I'll run through it, and I'll put the formatting below me so you can follow along. Zoom in. We're going to go, we'll even go, let's just get in here. Let's go like 150%. So now you get to see all the problems. There's a hooded merganser. That's the original. That's Photoshop's noise reduction. Did a good job. It softens it. It doesn't have the ability to sharpen and denoise in the same process as well. I'm not saying it doesn't work. This is a Topaz version. That was the best I could get out of Topaz. And then here's the 3. And again, I'll put it down below so you can tell which one we're on. That's PureRAW. That's PureRAW. This one looked pretty good. That sharpened up. You saw it like snap to sharpen. Pretty good. And that's another version. Some of the sharper ones looked a little more processed. It really, again, it's personal preference. Some people like that sharp look. Some people say it looks over processed. I'm going to run back one more time. This time I'm going to go ahead and put that adjustment on so we can really look at noise instead of sharpening. But let's just look at the noise performance. That's the Photoshop noise. And I'll actually zoom this up a little bit so we can see it. There we go. Topaz noise reduction, DxO noise reduction, DxO noise reduction, and DxO. Different versions. So you saw, depending on which version I used of DxO, and there's a lot of sliders in there, I wanted to show you a couple options. I wanted to show you one that was really smooth and one that had a little bit of noise in case that's your preference. I don't want to give you the impression that there's only one output. I tried to get the outputs that look best to me. Could do 2-hour videos on this stuff and do 100 comparisons. But I do have one more comparison, and this is, I think, going to be a pretty good one. So let's pop this last comparison up. Okay, so this last example is a duck that I took recently. It's shot at ISO 3200 and it's underexposed. If we were to expose this properly, my guess is the true noise of this image would be equivalent to about 6400. So I was, on this day, I was trying to shoot like some silhouette-y type thing, so I underexposed it a little bit. The bottom line is there's going to be a significant amount of noise. Now I'm going to run through the ways I processed this first, then we'll zoom in, we'll put a filter on it. So let me just show you the 4 ways I processed. This is, this is Topaz done in the Photoshop filter. So this is the filter that's not a true raw filter. The second one is Topaz True Raw. I do not know why that adjusted that, but it's probably compensating for a lens correction. So some softwares, DxO does it too. It compensates for lens correction. So it may like kind of barrel it a little bit or pinch it a little bit. This is DxO. I did 2 versions of DxO, and then I added a final version here. And in that version of DxO, it looked like, you see that difference in lighting? It's interesting. I think that's that vignetting control. I may have accidentally turned it off. So don't worry about that too much. We're going to look at really the noise performance. So I'm going to zoom in for this one. We're at 100%. And let's look at it. Topaz done in the program. So through the filter plugin. Raw Topaz. Raw DxO. And another version of Raw DxO. That second version had more of the denoising applied. Since it's hard to see, I'm going to move this down. We're going to get a good section of noise up here, and I'm going to put this photo filter on. Now, this is the original. We'll do it one more time. That is done in Topaz. You are seeing everything. So every flaw of an image is going to be evident here. I'll even go into 150 or so percent. And you're going to be able to see it. You can't see all this with your naked eye. Oh, hold on. Figures I'm recording the video and my fingers don't work. All right, there we go. So this is done not as a raw file. It's done as a high quality, I call it a TIFF equivalent file. When you're working in Photoshop, very similar format to a TIFF file in terms of information. This is the raw denoise. So I think that's a little bit better. This is the DxO denoise. That's the first version. And then I have one with a little bit more cleanup. And if we look carefully between this DxO, that's Topaz. It is simply a matter of opinion. I mean, we're zoomed in like unrealistically large. Here's the point. You can't, the stuff I'm showing you, you can't really even see with your naked eye. I will put a tight comparison, full screen. So I'm going to give you 4 images, full screen. I'll label them for you. This was the original. I'll show you the Topaz. I'll show you the Topaz RAW, and then I'll show you the best DxO. One thing I want to show you, I want to look at, when we look at this fine detail, there is a slight difference in quality. Let me come back to this. There's a slight difference in quality when we look at these transitions. So these are like gradients, and this is where you typically see pixelation in an image. The first Topaz, when I processed it in Photoshop, by the way, this is how I edit. I like the convenience of it. I think you get a little bit better quality, but I honestly, like, it's so convenient for me, I accept it. This is that first change. Look at the, like in this area. Okay, let me go back. Topaz in Photoshop filter, Topaz in the RAW filter. I think that's smoother and more even. You can't see it with your naked eye. The only way you could see it is to get in here quick, like crazy close like this. This is the DxO. This is even better in my opinion. So if I was nitpicking, and I mean really, really, really nitpicking, maybe I would say in some cases DxO is better. Sometimes Topaz sharpened a little better. It looked a little better. Maybe it created more artifacts. So much of this is going to be based off your personal impression. So you could see sometimes one looks better. In another situation, another one looks better. I zoom in. Sometimes one looks better. I zoom out. Sometimes another software looks better. This is what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to put a chart over here. We're going to do like a scorecard. You guys know, if you watch my channel, you know I love to do comparisons. I also love these like scorecards and rankings. If we were talking about results, in many cases, DxO I thought looked better. In some cases, I thought Topaz looked better. I thought in both cases, the filter menu through Photoshop was a small, very small difference in quality. Not quite as good as I processed it in RAW. And I mentioned earlier in the video, in the old days, it worked better in the filter menu, but now I think the RAW has caught up. So number one, results, I'm calling this even. Some people are going to argue. They're going to say one's better than the other. I am pretty sure both of these outperformed Photoshop. Every time I did it, I got a better result than I did in just I said Photoshop, but I should probably say Lightroom or Camera Raw. So the noise reduction built into Lightroom or Camera Raw. I thought my results were always better with this. Again, not a huge difference. If you don't have the money, don't buy either product. If you got Lightroom and you're happy with it, keep it. But if you want to spend a little bit and maybe get a payback, I think both of these products are better. But I think they're even. I don't think one strictly outperformed the other. In some ways, I think DxO could look a little more natural. And then sometimes Topaz could look a little sharper, but when you get in close, you may notice it's got like these little, I don't want to say anomalies, but just like little artifacting, like tiny, but it's very hard to tell. Looks sharper. Workflow ease. So in other words, which one is just easier to use? DxO was simpler. It's got fewer sliders. The sliders work really well. I got the results out of it I wanted. I'm going to give that a 1-star advantage. Workflow flexibility, 2 to 3 stars for Topaz. And here's why. I got way more adjustments, and I've got the ability to work right into Photoshop as part of a Photoshop workflow. I can't do that in DxO, so I have to give a huge advantage. And that's where I think Topaz has the biggest advantage here. Fine-tuning. Topaz has a lot of options that DxO Labs PureRAW 5 does not. So I showed you some of that, the removal tools, the lighting adjustments, like there's all of those filters. Each of the sharpening and denoise functions has multiple options. Look at, like when you look at the tabs for what's in there, there's a lot that Topaz offers that DxO doesn't. So DxO's simpler, not as much fine tuning. That's the major difference in terms of how it operates. Speed. Topaz seemed to open a little faster, but then it got slower for everything else. So in other words, open pretty quick, process the original batch pretty quick, but anything I had to do outside of that. So if I was making changes, adjusting sliders, multiple sliders, export process, all slowed down quite a bit. And the amount of computer processing power was as much as 4 times as great, meaning my CPU usage was as much as 4 times as great, and my memory usage was as much as 4 times as great on my system. Your system could be different. If the system requirements are a concern, Topaz, you might struggle. All right, so just know that. And then this idea of cost and ownership and payment structure. If I put 2 categories up here, one for the actual type of payment structure, most people if I poll 90% are going to say, I prefer one and done purchase over subscription. Most people say that. A lot of people are not happy with the Topaz choice to go to subscription. Could change in the future. But right now, that payment structure is probably less favorable than a one and done purchase. From an annual cost, let's assume that we're spending $200 a year for Topaz. Initial cost of DxO Labs is $100 with my discount, about $100, a little over. And then to upgrade every year, if we assume you're doing one upgrade a year, and you don't have to, maybe it's another $70. So on average, the cost of ownership is probably, the longer you have it, the cheaper it's going to get. Maybe the average cost is around $100 a year to own. And then if you own it for 5 years, it keeps going down because you don't have to do the updates as often. The updates are a little cheaper. So maybe it's like $70, $80, $85 versus a constant subscription for Topaz, which is going to be around $200. Topaz offers sales. So check with them first, because if it's strictly a financial decision, they may have a sale going on, and they offer a studio suite bundle that gives you video, gigapixels, and photo. It's not a bad price. It's about $37 a month, I think, on that one. Check the description down below for the pricing. But if you do video, it's got some really powerful video editing software. So Topaz has other suites available and other packages, but check that out. So pretty comprehensive. That's my scorecard right there. I'll pull it up again. That's the scorecard. If you've used these, I am super curious what you think. Some of you are going to be convinced that you can just do it in Photoshop or Lightroom, in Camera Raw. Maybe you can, and that's fine. I don't think it's as good, but you could argue with me down in the comments. Did I miss anything? Do you appreciate these reviews a little bit more in detail? Is there another software product you're curious about? I'm happy to compare this with On One. So if anybody wants that comparison, there are a couple other photo editing suites out there. Luminar is an example of one that's out there. It's more of a comprehensive editing tool. Today, I was really focused on noise reduction. So it's kind of the crux of this was noise reduction. We talked a little bit about sharpening and some other things in there, but the crux was noise reduction. And I hopefully you saw the difference. And hopefully these kind of comparisons, these direct comparisons are helpful to you. Again, let me know down in the comments. If you're not subscribed to the channel, got a lot of playlists out there, including some of these software reviews, hardware reviews. I do a lot of opinion pieces as well. So check out my playlist. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. Hit that like button. That'll push the content out to other individuals with the same interests. And as always, I hope we can continue to find inspiration in wildlife together.